thank you everybody for joining us. And of course, this is a specific webinar for our channel partners around the world. So Heisel and I are here in California. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. And I know many of you are in different time zones, some of them in your afternoon or some of them evening. And I also wanted to welcome Tom, Starlet Tom with us. Tom, if you could come off camera and mute for 1 second. So we've expanded our team. Tom is in a regional sales manager, so he's supporting our partners in Asia Pacific and also in EMEA. Tom, could you introduce yourself briefly before we get started?
Hello everyone, my name is Tom. I am based out in Noida. I handle sales for EMEA and Asia Pacific region. Katya, I've done a good job of introducing myself, so I don't have to do anything else.
All right, thank you. And I'll introduce myself. I'm Garth Rose, co-founder and CEO of GenRocket. We're in our 10th year, and I'm here with Mr. Taylor, the inventor of GenRocket. Heisel Taylor, these days, co-founder, always co-founder, but CTO and chief architect. Okay, we're going to get started. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Got a really exciting webinar and also demo to show you these self-service capabilities. In terms of the agenda, we want to welcome you. We've just done that. We'd like to give you a company update, what's going on at GenRocket, then a little bit of industry context, what's going on in the world of software quality and test data from the GenRocket perspective. We've got some reference to World Quality Report there as well. Then we'll introduce you to the enterprise launch. Thank you for being here to learn about what is new and coming out tomorrow. And we'll give you a live demo and then of course open it up for Q&A. This should be a good amount of time for Q&A. And in terms of a Zoom webinar, you'll at the bottom, you'll notice sort of I'm pointing down that way. There's something that says Q&A, question and answer. So feel free to put questions in there anytime. We'll probably get to those towards the end, but you don't feel like you have to wait until the end to put the questions in there. Okay, we're gonna get going. So in terms of the company update, 2020 was a great year for us. We had 100% revenue growth. We added a whole bunch more team members, up to 35 team members. We're growing very rapidly. Across our customer base, the license retention rate was 95.5%. Of course, we're very understanding that many of your lives and our lives are impacted by COVID, but even in a COVID year, we had a very strong license retention rate. Almost everybody renewed. And we're very grateful to you, our partners, because these days about 80% of the opportunities that come to GenRocket come through you. You make those introductions. Now these days we have 5x24-hour support, over 1,000 knowledge-based articles, GenRocket University. We are going to be doing some overhauling of GenRocket University. So instead of having to, if you want to get to a particular video, we're going to be launching Flight School. And Flight School will be able to go to the website, click on the video and just play it right off the website versus having to request to sign up in a course. University will still be a certification path, but there will also in the next couple of months be Flight School. And of course, we have customer success managers to work with you and your customers. The patent hasn't changed. We have the only patent in the test data industry that we're aware of, the synthetic data generation with referential integrity. And at this point, we're now past 30 alliance and technology partners, over 500 GenRocket certified engineers, and still offering through our partners no-cost proof of concepts and deal registration on the website. So what's going on in the software quality industry? Fascinating study that came out just a month or two ago from the CISQ, Consortium for Information Software Quality. About $2.1 trillion were lost because of poor software quality. So it is a huge impact, whether it be on cybersecurity or legacy system, digital transformations. There's still a major issue going on out there. And software quality is maximized by what? Well, of course, by testing. That's a piece, a very important part of it. Yes, design and other elements and agile methods greatly help, but also the right test data is critical. The right data variety, the right data volume, and the right data velocity. And of course, we're excited to be able to address that with GenRocket. So a reminder, because many of your customers are still doing this today. They're using spreadsheets to manually generate data, and they're copying production data. Now, we're not saying copying and masking production data is bad, but look what's going on in the industry. These are the primary methods, yet you go and look at this prior chart, and there's a lot of issues going on out there. So something's wrong in the sense that 50% of QA professionals are still having challenges with test data, 30 to 60% of time spent on provisioning data, And only 20% of organizations have automated testing. So you can see there's still a lot of pain in the industry. So why? Well, as a reminder, if you think about any of your customers that you're talking to, that you're working with, are any of them using spreadsheets? Spreadsheets are essentially manual data. They're limited in the volume and the kind of variety of data you can get, because now you have to, if you're going to get a negative test case, you got to create that by hand. They're two-dimensional. Heisel Taylor loves to point that out. It's really hard to maintain referential integrity, but beyond one or two spreadsheets. Imagine having 15 or 20 tables and having a spreadsheet for each table. Really, really difficult. And regardless, very labor intensive. And then production data, it certainly is realistic data. Depends upon the tool you're using, but for example, well-known vendor tools can take up to 30 days to go through this process of cloning, subsetting, and masking. And of course, production data doesn't have the unique data, the variety of data, negative data, edge case, and so forth. So what's the impact on agile teams? Reduced coverage and speed related to what we just saw before. There's a lack of that negative data and permutations and combinations and faster time and so forth. So unfortunately, what the World Quality Report is telling us, there's still a lot of pain in the marketplace, and a lot is related to test data. And this is where the emergence of synthetic data comes in, because you can design test data for just about any requirement. Yes, you can have realistic data like production data, but also that's the happy path. But you can have negative data, unique permutations, workflow data, end-to-end testing data, transactional data in the past or in the future, data feeds between microservices. Many of you may know that we have released what we would consider a market-leading X12 EDI test data solution. And we're getting ready to release an IoT solution that's going to be really interesting for the marketplace. There's a lot of IoT startups. They need data related to sensors, not databases, data in motion. That's something that GenRocket does really well. And this data can be used for any test. So when you're thinking about, do I bring GenRocket in to one of my customers, whether it's unit testing, API over REST, socket API or SOAP, or for typical functional testing or other kind of testing, any kind of test, GenRocket is well positioned for. So now we're excited to move into the enterprise launch of our self-service synthetic data platform. And what's in that launch? What's happened over the past year, or perhaps since the last time you connected with us? Well, we've made huge progress in terms of the number and variety of data generators, and in the variety and number of data formats, our receivers, and how we can do self-service, the data validity of data, and we're able to blend in production data values for data validity, the scalability of the solution, the lifecycle management, and of course, the bottom line, because the whole industry is going from waterfall to agile, very much designed for agile and DevOps. So going through in those, what we're going to do, by the way, is I'm going to go through each of these points. Heisel Taylor is going to add some context, some of his thoughts, and then we're going to go into a live demo to kind of show you this all being pulled together. So in terms of data generators, we're now up to 650 data generators. Look at that. We have country generators, name, address, city, state, postal code, and so forth for 39 countries, and many more in the areas of financial and business logic and calendar and string manipulation and so forth. So extensive coverage. If you are working in the European Union, we have country generators for every single EU country. Data formats. We've now, this says 75 plus, we're actually up to 79 receivers. Any SQL database, any NoSQL database, but then we go beyond just databases. So of course, flat and nested XML and JSON, all the different sort of APIs, REST API, socket API, and so forth. Commercial off-the-shelf products like Salesforce, SAP, Guidewire, Duck Creek. Some really new, cool new things, Kafka, Swift, ISO 20022, and you can see the list down here. So it is really ballooned. And Heisel always reminds me to say we currently support these. And this is a partial list, by the way. Why do you say that, Heisel? Why is it we currently have 79 receivers?
Because we're constantly adding new receivers, we're constantly adding new generators. The GenRocket platform is not a finite system. It's a system that says anytime you walk into a new customer environment, there are going to be new types of things that they may need, and GenRocket has to be able to adapt very quickly, which is why we can normally turn out a new generator between 24 and 72 hours, and a new receiver between 1 and 2 weeks, 1 and 3 weeks. The fastest though we turned out a receiver, which was for MongoDB, was less than 24 hours.
Awesome, Heisel. Thank you very much. So now we get into the whole concept of self-service. And every TDM, and we consider ourselves test data automation, not TDM, but every TDM vendor likes to talk about self-service, but we want to really point out that it's much more of a centralized self-service model. In other words, there's a tester over here, they need test data, they put a request into the test data team, the test data team spends a certain amount of time searching for that, querying it, and popping that data, either popping the data into a database where the tester has to write a query, or in a test data portal where the tester has to go retrieve that. That's not what we would call true self-service or distributed self-service. For one of our customers, they are using a well-known vendor product, and they have a 15-person test data team like this. And for an equivalent amount of data, because they've recently brought in GenRocket, they have 2 people as in that centralized team. And they're not actually building the data much. They're more doing little POCs and advising the people in their QA teams. Now, the GenRocket model is much more of a distributed self-service model where the tester, because we've been continually building in ease of use and automations and graphics so you can see the data relationships, now it's really pushing that out there. We're not saying they can't be a centralized self-service test data team, but the beauty of this is a huge cost saving and huge advances in speed. Now, Heisel, I know you like to talk about what we're doing in the way of automations and ease of use. Could you just touch on that for a moment? Because I know you're never satisfied with the level of ease of use.
Sure. So, it's very important that our user experience on top of GenRocket platform is equal in amount to what it can actually do, because it's not just the speed in which we generate data, but it's also the speed in which you can interact with our platform to model that data. So we are constantly taking in customer feedback. We're going to be adding a lot of new graphics to our platform, a lot more more like a Google map type of thing where you can navigate very quickly to move around the platform and learn the platform a lot easier. We're adding a lot more automations into the platform so that it can help you and more or less direct you on how to use GenRocket effectively and efficiently.
And while everybody's involved in ease of use, we've also added a UX designer to our team just to help speed that up as well. Great. When we look at the self-service components, these are components Heisel designed over the past year, and now these are coming out as part of our self-service synthetic data. You're going to see these in use, but we're going to introduce these to you right now. So the 5 key components for self-service are, first of all, the test data case. So test data case might be a test data case for a unit test where we want to synthetically generate 100 customers, or it might be an integration test, 5 branches, 10 accounts, and 1,000 customers. Now, against that case, we can apply rules. So now we can have a case for an integration test, but those customers, we can also specify, and you'll see this in the demo, Platinum customers have a starting bank balance of 10,000, Gold customers have a range for their bank balance. And we can also apply queries in that case. We can blend that in. So we can now say, hey, I'm going to have a customer, it's going to be a Platinum customer, and I'm going to bring in their real account number. So that's all of the beauty of this self-service layer. And we can organize these using some agile terminology into stories and epics. Again, we're getting to, in just a few more minutes, Heisel showing you a live demo of these components in action. Now, the 4th of the 7 items that are part of our enterprise launch is data validity. And I just touched on it a moment ago. Heisel, could you just tell the audience, why is data validity for test data so important, and why do we have 17 query generators?
So data validity is important because you want to test specific algorithms on your platform. The foundation of an entire application is not on the big workflows, but it's on actual functions and methods that are actually working in the background, and you want to be able to generate the appropriate data to actually validate those. On top of that, though, that means that not only when GenRocket is generating synthetic data, sometimes it has to look at enumerated data that already exists in your environment. And that data, it could be coming from SQL databases or NoSQL database like MongoDB or even exist in your spreadsheets. So we have 17 different types of query generators because what they do is they query that information from your enumerated data. So for instance, we might say, select the person's birth date and their salary based on their external ID, and then another synthetic generator, a CalcGen, might calculate what their new salary bonus would be.
Awesome. And so that beauty, and Haisel, when the blending process happens, so if someone was to run a scenario with a test data case where the query is happening, does it happen separately or does it happen all in a blink of an eye?
It happens in real time.
Perfect answer. Okay, so that's item number 4 is data validity, part of our enterprise launch. Now, number 5 is scalability. From the day I met Haisel about 11 years ago, he said he worked on an architecture, our patented engine, that allows data to be generated extremely fast. And Haisel, you were working back then, I think, with 486 machines, and just so you really had to figure out, I have little memory and not a big processor, and I had to have a clever way to be able to scale up for the test data. Am I correct?
Yeah, so we should explain what that means, 486. This is the earlier versions of piece of CPUs that were working only at only at millions of instructions per second, as opposed to the billions that they're doing now, and only had 640K of RAM compared to the gigabytes of memory we have now. So the question was, how do I generate hundreds of millions of rows of data with that amount of CPU power and that amount of memory? In the event-driven engine, which I wrote, allowed me to do that.
Awesome. And so what you can see here is for typical functional tests, and when Haisel said real time, he's not joking. It's about if you're running a CI/CD pipeline and you call the GenRocket -r command, it can be done by Jenkins or in a shell script or a batch file. That's going to produce the data as it's going through those test cases on average in about 100 milliseconds. And if it's a little bit more volume, at a rate of 10,000 rows a second. And Haisel, people on the call may not be aware that we have a partition engine. What's that and what's it do?
So the partition engine allows us to do rates higher than 10,000 rows per second, because that's technically kind of slow when you have to generate large volumes of data, let's say into the billions. So the partition engine says you can partition GenRocket across multiple instances on a single box or across multiple servers with multiple instances. So you can get up to the point where you're generating not just 10,000 rows per second, but hundreds of thousands to millions of rows per second across multiple instances.
Super cool. And lastly, as we're getting into this whole self-service enterprise launch, the key for Haisel was saying, how do I have a test data project, and that can be related to another project. A project relates to an application or a database. So this might be a general ledger project. This might be a CRM project, for example, or it might be Duck Creek, or it might be Guidewire. But the point is that you can have, depending on the license level, unlimited projects. And within those projects, as you're producing data, you can have different test data cases with rules and queries, and they can be organized into stories and epics. And we had to have a way in our launch to have an enterprise be able to organize and manage, share, and automatically maintain thousands of test data cases. And we're going to get to that in Haisel. We're going to show them about gRepository Server a little bit later on after your demo.
Okay.
So number 6 of 7 is lifecycle management. And so at the enterprise level, when you're rolling out GenRocket to a large enterprise, of course they want to be able to manage it. So we've created team permissions. So across those different projects I just showed you, there's an ability at an administrator level, an org admin level, to be able to restrict and control who has access to what. We also provide analytics, so a team member or a manager can have full reporting and analytics about what's going on in terms of users, projects, platform activity, and so forth. And of course, for enterprise scalability, single sign-on. And this is something, you notice a little starburst there, which we are announcing now. It's not out, it's going to be coming out in April, but it's in development right now, and it is part of our enterprise launch. Could you tell the audience, Haisel, what's G-Delta?
So on our platform, what we do is refactoring, automatic refactoring of domains that automatically says if you're going to change an attribute or modify generator parameters or anything like that, anything that's associated to that, it automatically cascades down and does a refactoring on it, especially when it comes to scenarios. Outside of that now, since a domain represents normally a mirror of a database table, what we want to be able to do is monitor your databases, your customers' databases, and then relay that information up to GenRocket. GenRocket will then figure out what the deltas are, the changes, the deletions, the adds, the modifications, the new parent-child relationships. It creates an audit, sends a link to tell the customer to come and look at the audit report and validate it. And then once they say, we agree with the things that GenRocket found, GenRocket will automatically refactor the current project version to mirror the changes that are taking place in your database. So we have full lifecycle, continuous lifecycle of what's happening on your environment and what's happening up in GenRocket Cloud.
Fantastic, Kaisel, thank you. And the seventh and final piece, which of course is essential. We started the beginning of the webinar talking about the World Quality Report and all of the pain in the industry and how test data is not quite there yet. And how do we help design a system that really is for Agile if only organizations have only 20% automated their test data provisioning. And so if you look at an Agile epic, just an example of some Agile stories. As an agent, I wish to generate a quote so I can add a new customer, and what's involved in that epic is creating an agent, creating a customer quote, making a payment. And of course, this is a series, this is a workflow going through a series of steps. How might I do that with the GenRocket methodology? So there's 4 key components here, or 4 steps, if you will: model, design, deploy, and manage. And if you think about defining the model, we just talked to you about the test data projects, depending on the license level, unlimited number of test data projects. And we have 10 different ways to set that up, the most popular extract table schema. And for any kind of a data model, and always with referential integrity. As a channel partner, when you're doing a GenRocket implementation, the modeling is quite quick. Where the time comes in, we're always asked, how long does it take? And we say, how many test data cases are you going to have? Because that's in the design phase. So in the design phase, are we going to have all kinds of permutations and combinations and negative data and unique data and so forth, or blended data with queries? This is where the time is using the tool to set that up. Again, it can be a distributed self-service model, so the testers can do it themselves, or you can have a centralized team or some combination there. And so you can see how you design the data. The deployment, you've learned about our 79 plus receivers. They allow you to have any output format, any sort of integration with any kind of framework, custom or industry standards, and of course, automated execution. And what we mean by that is, and Heisel's going to show you, when you run the command line, the GenRocket -small r, you can use a batch file or a shell script or Jenkins to launch that. So it does full automated execution. And of course, we talked about the management layer there as well. So here it is, sort of a visual way to look at it. When you're running your Agile sprint and you've got your cases and your rules and your queries, and they can be organized into stories and up into epics, there's sort of the visual of it. So what we have is that test data case sitting there ready to go. And you've of course gone through your Agile sprint. You've written your user stories, your acceptance criteria, your different test scenarios. And now what? You're at the point where you're building your test case, and what maps to a test case? Test data. Where does the test data come? Traditionally, we're going to now write a query. I'm going to go to the database to try and pull that data back, or we're going to go grab a spreadsheet. But why do that when you can have on-demand, real-time data for all kinds of variety with a test data case, and all you have to do is integrate the GenRocket -r command right in at the time of execution. It's a really elegant solution for Agile environments. And that's sort of a bigger picture of showing how it works, whether it's for the developer side, where you're going through the unit testing side of things, or in the staging environment where you're spinning up your test environment and doing continuous integration and running your integration tests and your load tests and so forth. Again, GenRocket is perfectly suited for the CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so what we want to do is now transition to Mr. Heisel Taylor in the live demo, and he's going to be, maybe you want to introduce it, Heisel. It's going to be a banking demo, but the purpose here is to communicate the whole self-service synthetic data platform and our capabilities there. Heisel, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, I think that was an adequate introduction.
Okay, you got it.
All right, so Garth, just let me know that you can see the ER diagram.
I can see it on your screen.
Okay, so for some of you who may not know this, this is what we call an entity relationship diagram It basically gives you a view of database tables, which we call entities. And we're looking at a simple banking application where we have two families of tables. The first family of tables here in the orange, we call these type tables: account type, transaction type, card type, and account level. They're all type tables, and they are all root tables in that they have no parents. They can have children, but they have no parents. And then we have over here, we have the account tables, which are heavily related to the type tables, and they're also heavily related to each other. The challenge with testing comes in where most testers will spend their time with two-dimensional spreadsheets because they can easily test a customer or a branch or a type because those are root tables. But then they start to run into challenges very quickly when there are many different relationships that go down on n dimensions. This is where a tester might then request information from production and try to retrieve the information they need, but often they're getting more information than they need or less information than they need to actually solve a testing challenge. So the nice part about GenRocket is we can extract the table schema information from a database and we can pull that into our platform. And I'm going to show you specifically two particular tables, the customer table and the account table, amongst all these other tables, what that might look like inside of our platform. So I'm going to log into GenRocket. I'm going to my GenRocket organization, and I'm going to bring in a particular, out of the different 78 projects I have in here, I'm going to go to the bank demo project. And now we're going to go to that first table I just mentioned, the customer table, which is now a customer domain, and you can see the attributes being represented here. It's like a type table to a certain extent. It's a root table. And if we look at its relationship, there's only itself. Now, if we go into something like the account table here, you'll see that the account table has a much deeper set of relationships. The account table has the branch as its parent. It has the account type and the account level as its siblings. And it also has the customer account and the transaction as its children. And we can even navigate to the children very easily here and even further down to all the different children and see what their relationships are. So now you have a way of looking at a complex database by seeing the immediate parents and or the children of a particular domain. That helps you better understand the models that you're working with. And then you can spend most of your time right here in our self-service part of the platform, where we're dealing with test data cases, rules, queries, stories, and epics. I'm going to go into test data cases. And here on that platform, you can see where you can have a list of different test data case suites. It's easy for you to add one on your own. You can simply go in here and hit the create button, create your own suite of test data cases. And within, let me turn that off right here. And within your test data cases, you can create different categories of how you want to start to categorize your test data cases. And you can see the list of categories that you can choose from. In my banking suite, I've chosen 4 different categories here: unit, negative, load, and integration. Unit is normally when I just want to do some very simple unit tests, which means I don't need a lot of information. So for instance, for the account domain, I actually want to have that in this particular test data case, I actually want to have the loop count being modified to the option of 10. And let's say for the branch, I'm having it modified to just the branch, modified its loop count to a loop count of 3. And what you're seeing right here on the command is the command of actually what that would look like. I'm saying I want to run a GenRocket test data case against the banking suite, the unit category, and I want to run the branch test data case. And I can run this on any scenario chain or scenario chain set, because GenRocket has an API and it uses its own API to go and search inside of that scenario. And if it found the branch domain, it would automatically change its loop count to 3. And that can make any modifications on the scenario in about 30 milliseconds just prior to running the scenario. So let's look at a different category. So here I have a load category where I'm saying, instead of doing 3 for the loop count for the branch, I want to do 1,000. Or for the customer, I want to generate 10,000 customers. And again, we're seeing the command right here. Now we can get really interesting and say, I want to do some more interesting things like I want to do a negative test. So you can always do happy path tests, but you can just as easily do a negative test inside of GenRocket. It doesn't really know the difference. It just knows it's supposed to generate you test data. So I'm going to the customer domain here. I'm setting the loop count to 100, but then I'm also going to go in and I'm going to modify the social security number, and I'm going to use one of our nice features in GenRocket, which is our link to generators. And I'm going to link 4 generators together to accomplish my negative test. So I am originally generating these real social security numbers. I actually want to introduce a list of disruptive characters, and I want to replace the dash with the disruptive character. And then every 4th iteration, not every iteration, but every 4th iteration, I actually want to create a negative test. And I can see the summary of that right here as well. When I just click on here, I can see the particular column or columns that I want to modify and see what that test is going to look like. Now, again, we have the instructions right down here. So I'm actually going to go do this. So this particular scenario story has been downloaded here. The scenario chains and the scenarios I need are right here. I've also have a database. I'm going to empty that database, and the receiver we're using is actually going to be writing data directly into these tables. And right now we see that we have 0 rows in the customer table, and we're going to actually generate this. Now, just prior to me generating this, think about what it would take for yourself or a tester to say, I want to generate a spreadsheet with all these different columns, and I want to create the pattern for the negative test and how long that might take. And at the time it took me to say that, if we go right here now and we just look at, refresh the customer here, we'll see that we did generate 100 rows. And if we just refresh here and look at the data, we have all the different columns of information. And sure enough, every 4th row, we actually have a negative test. So remember, I set the loop count for 100, but I didn't want to see this on every single row, and I didn't want just one test, but I actually really want to see this on every 4th test so I can actually control the environment of my negative test. Now, the nice part about this is I can also just go out here and immediately delete this, because GenRocket can just create this information on the fly. So the other rule in a really good test is test data should exist when you need it. It should cease to exist when you're done, so you can move on to the next test and run every test autonomously from any other test. So let's go back over here to the database and look at the account tables. And what I want to do is an integration test this time. I want to be able to populate all 4 of the type tables. And I want to populate them with very specific data that I want, because later on, when I'm populating the account tables, I want to use some information over here to get exactly what I want. So I'm going to go back over here, and now we have the integration category. And what I've done is I've created 3 different integration test data cases. Just look at the type tables here. I've added 4 different domains here. Type tables have already know what their loop counts are, so that's already taken care of. And here's my command. So I'm just going to go back over here, and we're going to run this command. And think again, the amount of time it might take you to have to set all this information up yourself and to modify this information in a spreadsheet to set up these different tables. And we'll just go ahead and take a look. So here, what I specified is I have 100, 101, and 102 for platinum, gold, and silver. That's going to be important later. I have the account types of checking and saving. I have my card types of Visa, debit, and credit, and I have my transaction types. I have them fully populated. Remember, these are the root tables, which the other account tables depend on. So now I can actually go back and look at some of my other integration tests. I have a medium load test here where I say I want to generate at least 1,000 customers. I want 5 branches. I want 10 accounts. That's going to be 10 accounts for each branch. Let's look at something a little bit simpler. This is the first test I want to run, where I want just 100 customers. I want 3 branches. I want 10 accounts for each branch. That means with referential integrity, I'm guaranteed to get 30 customer accounts, 30 car products, and 30 transactions. The other thing I want to do here is I actually want to add a test data rule. And I can see the summary of this right now, because when I'm creating the balance for each customer, I want them to have a proper balance, that when they are a platinum customer, that they're getting a balance greater than 10,000, with their gold is between 5,000 and 9,999. So let's look at this part of our self-serve platform. Very similar to our test data cases part of the platform, you can create your own rule set here. I've created one here that says starting balance of rules. And then you can break your rules down into simple concerns. I'm going to show you the summary of what that looks like here, because they can get really complex if you want. But you can break them down into simple concerns. So here I'm basically stating what I want the first part of the rule to do. Here's the action. In the action, I'm just selecting the domain. I'm selecting the attribute. I'm selecting the qualifier. If it is equal to 100, then, and I can do compound rules as well, but I'm going to do a simple then here. Then my action, I actually wanted to, in real time, I wanted to use the random money gen generator, which has a value between $10,000 and $20,000. So what I've done is I've put these rules together to make sure that all of those apply. And then what I can easily do is I can add one or more rules to a particular test data case, making this test data case as complex as I want to give me exactly what I want. So let's just take a look at the command right here. We're going to run the banking integration small setup. So I'm going to go right back over here. I'm going to grab this next one here. Now, just think about this. This is where testing, even for myself, long before I had GenRocket, this is where testing would fail, because the amount of complexities with the parent, child, and sibling relationships across all the different domains makes it difficult to think in dimensions and try to create this test data. But at a time, yes.
And if I may, one of the things we hear a lot from the marketplace is it's really hard to get data in a certain state or a condition for a particular test. And that's the beauty of what you're showing here with these rules, isn't it?
Yes, because now we've set up the rules on the type tables, and now we're actually using those rules as we populate the account tables. And I didn't have to overthink that. I could think about what I wanted to do and less how I actually wanted to do it. GenRocket is handling that for me. So if I actually go in here now and look at here, I've created my 3 branches. If I go to the accounts, I actually have 10 accounts for each branch. And if I look at my account levels, sure enough, based on the business rules of 100, 101, and 102 platinum, gold, and silver, I'm actually getting the balances exactly as I want. And then if I go to the card products here, sure enough, I have 30 card products, I have 30 customer accounts, and I have 30 transactions, all with full referential integrity. Now, again, the nice part about this, whether it's a simple test or it's a complex test, I can easily just go out there and delete all this information, and I don't need it anymore because I'm done using it for whatever testing I needed to do. And now what I'm going to go do is I'm going to do the larger, the medium amount, where I had the 5 branches this time. And now we're repopulating the entire database from scratch again. So this allows me again to think outside the box and say, oh, I want to try something different. And I don't have to worry about the time it takes me to do it, because I'm just running a different test data case. My loop counts are slightly different. And then if I go in here, let's look at the customers. We now should have 1,000 customers, and we do. If we look at the branches, we now have 5 branches. We should have 10 accounts for each branch. That means we should have 50 accounts all the way down through. If we get down to the transactions, I actually have 150 transactions. And remember, I could scale this again if I wanted to a larger level, where I would have, let's say, 10 branches or 100 branches, and I could have as much as 10,000 or 100,000 customers, and I could simulate transactions going back 10 years if I wanted to, or going forward 10 years if I wanted to. But that's the autonomy you get by thinking what you want to do with your test data cases. Now, one last thing here. Now imagine you are a large team, you have a large banking application, and you're dividing and conquering by looking at different families of tables, and each of you are groups are working on your different test data cases. You're going to want to start to consider how you want to package that information into a set of stories. So for instance, we have 3 stories up here: the banking account stories, populating account subset account tables, and the populate type tables. The simple banking stories here deal with the granular level of, let's say, populating just the branch or populating the customer. But as you start to populate the account actually depends on the branch, so it inherits the stories or the chapters from the branch. If you populate the customer account, it has to inherit the stories from the populate account and on up the tree, all the way down to the card products. Each one of understanding the inheritance of chapters above it. So GenRocket is handling that automatically. Then when we look at something like the populate type tables, what I've done is I put those all into one story, but I've also specified the particular scenario that I want them to use. I specified the particular test data case I want them to use. It's all fully packaged, and then I have this one line of command that I want to do here. I further populated the medium and the small population here. I can see a summary of what I've chosen. And then now let's think about, you have those stories, but now you want to move that up into epics, because epics really allows you to combine different stories to accomplish things. So you saw me running 2 different sets of test data cases, one to set up the type tables and another to set up the medium load. Now what I've done is I've combined those into an epic. So you can imagine if you have a large family of stories, you can start combining stories together to populate entire databases with a particular epic, small, medium, large, what have you in different situations. So now you're seeing the power of our test data rules platform, our self-serve platform sitting on top of the 5 key components. Garth, I'll hand it back over to you for summary.
Thank you. And you and I are going to do a little bit of this together. So we're just getting ready to definitely start popping in your questions. I see one question. We're going to come back to that as well. If I pop in here, you can see enterprise solution architecture, Haisel.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So we want to summarize so this enterprise launch, what's enterprise class from a synthetic data platform perspective? As many projects as you want, obviously the different permissions and the analytics around that, so you can see what's going on. The ability to have a true self-service platform for testers creating their own test data cases, applying their own rules, their own queries, and organizing them, as Haisel just showed you, into stories and epics. All the generators you need, every European Union country, pretty much whatever the marketplace needs, we have a generator for it. We will add more, but the point is that it covers a lot of use cases. And currently at 79 receivers for, again, pretty much all the requirements for formats that the marketplace has asked us for. Now, one of the new components that's come out, Haisel, is G repository server. Why is that so important part of this announcement?
So this was important because we've had many customers requesting more security around their platforms and not so much using our downloading offline certificates, better statistics management so that information can go up to our G Analytics platform, but also the ability to just have things being managed in real time. So when you think about all of the different components now that you would have in terms of the domains, the scenarios, the test data cases, rules and queries, stories and epics, packaging all of that up for yourselves would be quite a major task. GenRocket monitors, the G repository server monitors the changes that happen on your platform in real time. So you can literally go to the command line and just say, I want to run a story in a particular repository, and GenRocket will immediately find the changes, bring that down in just a few milliseconds, update your repository in your local environment, and then you're off to the races running that information without worrying about whether it's up to date or where it's packaged and how it's packaged.
Awesome, Haisel. Reminding everybody, now that you've got all these, this organized structure, you sure Haisel showing you that organized and management layer, self-service layer for the different cases, rules, queries, stories, and epics. And a reminder, you now get to integrate right to with your CI/CD, your agile pipeline, and each test case maps to a test data case. And when it's being launched, as I've said twice before, use the command line GenRocket-R or batch file a shell script. Haisel, there's other ways too, API. What are some of the other ways you can launch the GenRocket command?
So we have a real-time REST receiver, real-time REST engine, so you can send the commands over REST. This is really good for people who are working with the languages that are not Java specific. We also have a real-time socket engine for people who are doing very instrumental socket programming and things like that. We have our GenRocket multi-user server, which talks over REST and it talks over socket. So there are plenty of different ways other than shell scripts, bash scripts, Jenkins, and things like that, complete autonomy of launching and manipulating scenarios in real time.
Very cool. Thank you, Haisel. We're also very excited to announce G subset. So some of you will know that we earlier had a tool, a basic tool for migrating data called G migration. And now we've enhanced it and we've repackaged it as G subset. Haisel, what is G subset?
So G subset is a much more powerful version of what we had in G migration. G migration allowed people to go in and write simple queries to take data from a source database to a destination database. And we said that's good for 10,000 to 100,000, maybe a max of 1 million rows. Well, a lot of requests came in from customers saying, well, we need to transfer hundreds of millions to billions of rows of data, possibly even a terabyte, but we also need much more complex subsetting so that I might say select a certain amount of addresses where the addresses are from the state of Illinois, but then I need you to traverse up the tree and find all the users associated to those addresses and then all of the departments associated to those users and so forth, and figure all that out automatically and then transfer that data very efficiently with synthetic data replacement. So we built a new threaded model that handles that across multiple threads, so we can do that migration with huge amounts of migration very quickly. And we also redid the interface to make it a lot user more friendly and much faster to set up your subsetting.
Awesome, Heisel, thank you. Last item before we go to Q&A is that we do have new pricing. I came out at the beginning of February. It's related right to this launch. We've added a lot of new functionality, and we've been listening to the marketplace, and we've repackaged up how all of this gets packaged. So we now have, so you're familiar with our older editions, GenRocket Group, Professional, and Enterprise. Those have been replaced. Those are 3 editions. Those have been replaced by 5 editions: Startup, Team, Premium, and Enterprise, and of course Unlimited. And as you can see, there's an annual license cost depending upon the level of the level of projects, the level of domains, tables in those projects, the number of named users. You'll see that the per user cost has gone down. That was a marketplace request. So now for a similar amount of money, a lot more users can use GenRocket. And you can see the tier of functionality. Everybody gets the self-service platform we just introduced you to. Everybody gets the library of generators and receivers. But then when it comes to things that are more enterprise class, like permissions, data lifecycle management, the subsetting, G subset we just showed you, those are in the more advanced editions. Okay, well, thank you for staying with us. What we want to do now is we want to open it up for questions. And the first one is that there's a question of, do you have release notes for new features along with all the releases? And the answer is yes. And so what I'm going to do is just pop in, we have our knowledge base, and I think most of you know about that. It's heavily visited, but I'm going to just send that right to you now. And so in that knowledge base article, there's over 1,000 knowledge base articles, and all the new features from G subset to G repository server and so forth, they're all been documented, and they're out. And I did notice, looking this morning at the what's new, that needs to be updated. Tom, I know you and Haroon can get that updated and make sure that's shared with our channel partners. Again, we can wrap up here, but this is a little opportunity to ask questions. So please go ahead. It's going to be down in the tray here, where you can type in it's labeled Q&A, and feel free to type in a question if you have one. Or we could also, another alternative is you could raise your hand and we could take you off mute so you could ask your question as well. Okay, questions just come in, Heisel. Do you have any plan for certification on the new features? Great question, Heisel.
No, you can go ahead and answer that one.
Oh, look at that smile. So yeah, I mentioned before in terms of GenRocket University, and we're also launching Flight School. So that Flight School will be that all of the GenRocket videos are available on the website. You don't have to register and so forth, but the answer is yes. We are repackaging up a sort of a, if you look at a great company, Salesforce, and how they have different badges, and other companies use this concept as well. We're going to repackage up into different badges and different certifications, and there will be certifications around all the new functionality that is in process that has not been completed. Anything you want to add, Heisel?
Yeah, it's just we turn out the technology faster than we get to actually doing the videos and
the documentation. No, well, documentation's out.
we're doing better on documentation. We're just not doing as fast on the videos, and that's something we have to improve on.
All right. Zach DeVell, thank you for your comment. I'm going to read it to you, Heisel. In an agile environment, everybody works individually and does data generation depending on their Scrum timelines. How is GenRocket capable of handling multiple users working on the same project in parallel mode at the same time? This could be painful in larger projects or organizations because one user updates overrides another. Great question. Go ahead, Heisel.
Sure. So this question has come up often. And we'll be making some improvements here, but in general, I already designed GenRocket that multiple users could work on the same project at the same time. Because when you think about how data gets posted to a database, even though you have multiple people, let's say across the planet, if you're working in the exact same domain on the exact same generator, the one who posts first is the one whose data goes into the database, but within milliseconds afterwards, another one could post. And unfortunately, they see the information that the other person actually entered. So one of the new features we're going to add onto the platform is if you happen to be in sharing, if two people are sharing the exact same domain at the same time or same attribute, you'll see a little information come up and saying, by the way, so-and-so is actually doing this at the exact same time. That's a new feature we're going to be adding onto the platform over the next quarter.
Awesome. Per's asking, in Stockholm's asking a similar question, Haisel. How does it work when multiple people work on the same project? Can you see if someone else is working with the same object?
Yeah, ask and answer, that's what we're actually going to be doing, yes.
Absolutely. So I'll say that one's done. Great questions. Thanks, Per. And then Rahul, what is the process to get existing customers license upgraded with new features and new cost models? That would, Tom, you can come back on because when you first introduced yourself, not everybody was on the webinar. So Tom is responsible for EMEA and also for Asia Pacific. So any requests for sort of upgrades pricing would go through Tom. He'll be able to help you out on that and quickly turn around it. And then I'm still responsible for North America. So Rahul, shoot an email over and we will work with you. What we've been doing in the very short term is honoring existing pricing for customers. In general, almost everybody has been moving to the new pricing because they see the higher value, but we don't want to lock customers in. We do want to work with the customers. After a short period of time, we will transition only to the new pricing. But anyway, hopefully that answers your question. Great question. Another question, Haisel, coming from Saktivel. Can we expect some options like commit, merge, and conflict resolving?
So let's talk about that for a second. So on the GenRocket platform, it's a highly complex platform, and it does versioning to the extent that you can create different versions of your application so that when you finally do a release, you create a new version of it. And the challenge here is that what you don't understand what's going on in the background of GenRocket when it refactors and so forth, even when you push the button to save one parameter or one generator, it does about 150 different functions in about 100 milliseconds. So we don't do reversals. We give you warnings ahead of time. If you do a delete, it's gone because we have to go through and do so many things on the platform to make those changes. We can't bring them back. However, that being said, what we are going to be adding, not this quarter, but probably next quarter, is the ability to say, here's version 1, here's version 2. Can I do a comparison of what I've done on the different versions? But no rollbacks, but comparisons, yes.
Super answer, Haisel. Great. Okay, last chance for questions. Very good questions. I appreciate this from our channel partners. So unless something else comes in, I want to thank everybody for joining us and attending us this morning, this afternoon, this evening, because of course people are in all different time zones. As I said at the very beginning, it's a really exciting time for GenRocket in terms of 100% growth last year, 95.5% license retention, and now rolling out. And we're not done, are we, Haisel, in terms of functionality?
We're never done. No, we're never done.
We've added a whole bunch more happy engineers to the team. We're doing some really cool work, and so there'll be more coming. But we felt this was an important sort of line in the sand to say, hey, we've now arrived as an enterprise class synthetic data platform. So we wanted to do the webinar. Please do note you would have signed up here, of course, through our GenRocket Advisor newsletter. That's where Haisel and Dave Zwicker and I, we try and put our content together. Tom helps in it as well. Going out to the marketplace. So if you're saying, well, what's going on at GenRocket, just keep an eye on that. It typically comes out every Wednesday, or it might, in India, it might be Thursday morning, but that's the typical cycle. We try and do that every week or every other week. Haisel, any parting words before we wrap up?
I just want to say thank you for attending this meeting. GenRocket only gets better because of the customers that are using it, because of the feedback you all give us. And we really look forward to it, and we're excited about all the new features that we're building right now, the ones that are going to be coming because of your feedback. So thank you from all of the team here at GenRocket.
All right, wonderful. Everybody have a great day. Thank you very much.